Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from these relationships. So here's today's question that came up, interesting one. What do you think? Are narcissistic relationships just a trend? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Here's my thought. I wish they were just a trend. I honestly, I'd be fine with being out of a job. I could find something else to do. I wish narcissistic relationships were just an unfortunate trend like bell bottoms or mullets without getting into the details. I'm having this experience of reading more and more content creators, sometimes even therapists, talking about clients or talking about people coming to therapy or just talking about toxic relationships and calling this a trend, as though it's last season's hem lengths. My poor staff has had to endure me going on a 30-minute rant about this, and then I felt anxious. My entire mission in my work has been to give anyone who's enduring a toxic or narcissistic relationship permission to talk about it. But if these folks were going into therapy or coaching or even going online, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, they were being shamed or being told they were whining or were wrong for not setting boundaries right, then it begs the question, is it even safe to talk about it? I don't like it when I have to consider that particularly some therapists don't get this. I don't like it when I have to think that some therapists don't get this. And I'm actually developing a training program on this right now. I think therapy is absolutely essential to coping with narcissistic abuse. I create this content to educate, but it's definitely not a substitute for therapy. Going through narcissistic relationships can bring up a whole host of issues depending on the person. In some cases, complex trauma. There can be significant anxiety. It can be really impacting a person in a way that this is not a DIY. This needs a therapist's guidance. And I will always hold that getting the help of a licensed mental health practitioner is crucial in healing from toxic relationships. All of that said, I really don't like to think that therapy could do more harm than good if there's ever a case that a therapist could push back on the idea that there may not be such a thing as a toxic relationship, or that people who talk about being in these relationships should have to be more accountable for themselves in the relationship. You know, my favorite was when I read that someone was suggesting that if you want to set a boundary, you just needed to keep repeating yourself. Can you imagine the end result if you kept repeating a boundary to a narcissistic person? I mean, it's just not going to work. The fact is, if you could survive the rage, the gaslighting, and the dysregulated mess of it all, not only would the boundary not be recognized or honored, you would be pretty darn trashed by the process, so trashed by the process, that it could turn you off on the entire enterprise of boundary setting and perpetuity, which is such an important thing. It's such an important skill to have in these relationships. This is a murky area in the world of mental health. And I am not entirely clear why there are so many people in the field of mental health that are opposed to the idea of understanding narcissistic relationships and then helping people navigate the fallout that happens. I have to say this, is that the therapists who get it are the angels amongst us. They're doing amazing work with clients. And you'll see this. There's many trauma-informed therapists that really get this. People who've worked in areas that are adjacent to that, who get this, right? And I can't stress enough, this is not nearly all therapists, and therapy is so crucial to this. I also think that in the world of mental health, there's a focus on, well, narcissistic patterns come from these places, so we need to support these people. So there's this, I don't know that therapists are rolling up, or the world of mental health is rolling up and saying, okay, some people are just going to have to sacrifice themselves for other people. But I just feel like we almost don't have a working model for this. But in all this stumbling around in the dark by the field of mental health, a lot of this is not being made sufficiently clear. And I think part of what's brought this up for me is that there's increasingly content I've been seeing, especially in the last few months, in the last few months that there's even been, I don't know if I call it a movement, but just more content amongst a subset of more vocal therapists and coaches that there's no such thing as narcissistic abuse. Listen, I'm willing to be open-minded about just about anything. I have actually spent in the time I've been practicing, I've worked with a substantial number of narcissistic clients. So I know what that territory looks like from the inside out. And I've been doing this work for decades. And then I did recognize that the field of mental health may very well be gaslighting not only the clients at times, but also the therapists who are committed to working with survivors of narcissistic abuse. I mean, I can sit here and contemplate, where this comes from, but that's for another day. I also notice that there's a lot of obsessiveness that we have to fight for relationships instead of recognizing that sometimes they just don't work out. I'm the first person to recognize that divorces and marriages ending take a real toll on children, that familial estrangement takes a toll on people, and that not having a job means that you can't pay the rent. I'm also the first to recognize that asking people to endure emotional abuse every day without giving them a roadmap to help them lift the blame off of themselves, especially after they've tried everything and taken responsibility for everyone's behavior in the relationship, to me, that's unacceptable. I do believe that there are a lot of folks out there who care so much about maintaining the status quo that there may sometimes be a real unwillingness to recognize the real pain of what happens in narcissistic relationships. Nobody out there wants to be estranged from their family. Nobody wants to get divorced or quit a job that they need or they like. Nobody wants that. But when there's a point that a person's sacrificing their health for it, sometimes there's not a lot of options. People are not calling out their relationships as narcissistic after the first fight. I mean, maybe on TikTok or Instagram they are, but not in the real world. In the real world, by the time a client comes to therapy, talking about the patterns in their relationship, they are in tremendous pain and despair. They're confused. They're full of self-doubt. They're blaming themselves. They're wondering what they themselves are doing wrong. Can you imagine anyone talking to that person, therapist, coach, even friend, that somebody's not able to hold space for the idea that they may be in a toxic relationship and instead wondering, the client wondering, oh, maybe I need to learn how to set boundaries better. Maybe I need to learn to express my needs better. Putting the onus on the person who's being abused. Well, I'm sure many of you can imagine it because you've been through it. People don't want to learn. In all my years of doing this, people don't want to learn that their parent or their partner or their adult child may be narcissistic and that these patterns aren't likely to change. But the denial of that can result in a lifetime of self-blame and self-doubt. I don't ever like popping anyone's bubble of a happy family, but I'm far more interested in setting people free from a life of devaluing themselves. There's times I think I want to get into my own bubble at times, to think that anyone in any kind of helping role wouldn't want to help people, set people free from the tyranny of these relationships, but I get now that that's not true. What that means for you is that if you are in any kind of healing relationship, even a friendship, and you're talking to someone and you don't feel safe bringing up concerns or shut down when you do, like I said, especially though in any kind of health care, mental health care relationship, it's okay to find someone new. It's not easy. Therapists are hard to find. Many have long wait lists or don't take your insurance, and having to keep repeatedly opening yourself up to someone new is a leap of faith. But a big part of healing is learning what feels safe and that it's okay to walk away from something where you don't feel you're being seen or recognized accurately. And that you should be able to share about a toxic relationship and not have your language be taken away. Listen, when people describe patterns in their relationships to me, I don't jump out of my chair and say, yeah, gotcha, that's it, narcissism. Instead, I ask them how they feel and how they felt, to try to understand what was happening in the relationship, how they thought about it, how long it's been going on. And slowly but surely, in working with these clients, we find ourselves to a place where the client also starts to recognize these patterns are not okay. And then I can be the validating voice for that client for something that they knew all along, that this is not healthy, but they were afraid to call out to themselves. Listen, I'm just one person, and I'm sure as hell I'm not going to make it my mission to change everyone's mind. My focus, with what energy I've got, is to focus on survivors of these relationships and giving you permission to always find spaces where you feel seen and heard. And to recognize that a few letters after someone's name and some certificates on the wall doesn't always mean that a person will definitely fully recognize your experience. Not everyone is going to be good for you. You have to trust your intuition, and if it doesn't feel good, give yourself permission to step away. Finding a therapist is no small task. It's really not. And it's not only overwhelming, because we're really not often in our best headspace when we're looking for someone. We often do feel like, well, if I don't like this person, what am I supposed to do? If you don't like this person, find someone else. It would be the same thing if you're finding a doctor, a dentist, nurse practitioner. It's the same with a therapist. I think therapy, again, is extraordinarily important. And because it's so important, it's important you find a space where you feel seen, heard, and recognized. And if you don't, you're not going to hurt the therapist's feelings if you decide to see someone else. And if that therapist says you did hurt their feelings, then you really did the right thing of getting away. I've had plenty of clients say, this isn't a good match for me. That's not personal. I actually really praise them for saying that this wasn't, so they can go on and find someone who works for them. So give yourself that permission, and know these relationships are not a trend. They have been here for thousands of years. We just happen to finally be talking about them. Thanks again.